let's take a look at page 3 of project 6. Okay, so we have a table that is a comparison of jumbo loans at different institutions. So these are our institutions over here. We've got Farmers and Merchants, MCO, First Federal, Century, and Metamora State Bank. So they're all comparing an $80,000 deposit at a 4-year term. But notice that the rest of the particulars are different, right? So they have different annual rates, they have different period per years, which means different periods, and so the amount and the interest earned and the annual yield all end up being slightly different from one another. So let's start by working on the table. The first thing you're asked to do is take a look at total periods and fill in a few blank places. Now remember, total periods is just how many periods occur through the life of this investment. So if I know the number of periods in a year and I know the number of years, I can find the total number of periods. For example, I see here that this was 4 periods per year for 4 years. So 4 periods per year for 4 years gives me a total of 16 periods. That's how they got 16. 12 periods per year for a total of 4 years gave me 48 periods. That's how they got 48. So if I take the periods per year and I multiply by the number of periods, I get the total number of periods. Okay, now what about amount? So remember, amount is just principal plus interest. Okay? So, for example, Farmers and Merchants started with a principal of $80,000, gained $13,588.68 in interest, which gave them a final amount, that total, of $93,588.68. So, if I didn't know the amount here, all I would have to do is take the principal for MCO Credit Union and the interest for MCO Credit Union and add them together, and that would give me the amount. I can also solve for interest using this equation, right? So if I know the amount for First Federal S&L and I know the principal, I can subtract, right? If I do amount minus principal, that will give me the interest, and I can solve for that box. So that's how you handle the table. Next, we have these questions on the bottom. So these first 4 are all asking you for institution names, okay? So all of your answers will be names of institutions from that column. The institution that compounds daily is, the institution that compounds monthly is, quarterly, annually, okay? And you'll find that answer by looking at this column. So for example, if I am compounding in 2 periods per year, that means I'm compounding semi-annually. What does it mean if I compound once a year, 4 times a year, 365 times a year, or 12 times a year? Okay? So the institution that compounds daily is, go look at this chart, find the number that signifies that they're compounding daily, and then the answer you write here is the name of the institution that does it. And that's the same with numbers 2, 3, and 4. Now, question 5 says, at the institution that provides the highest annual yield on $80,000 in 4 years, the annual rate is... So this is going to bounce us around a little bit. Notice that our answer should be an annual rate, which means this should be a percentage. So at the institution that provides the highest annual yield on $80,000 in 4 years. So let's start there. So we're looking for the highest annual yield of all of these because they're all $80,000 deposits, they're all 4-year terms. So look at the annual yield and figure out which one is the highest yield. So at that same institution, what is the annual rate? So for example, if it turned out that Farmers and Merchants had the highest yield, which it doesn't, but if it turned out that Farmers and Merchants had the highest annual yield, I would report that the annual rate is 4%, okay? So this is where you will identify the name of the institution that you're going to look at, but annual rate is going to be where you get your answer from. You will also need to fill in from that same row, from that same institution, the total number of periods from this column. Total periods, which you have already filled out in the first part of this table. So again, for number 5, you're identifying an institution that provides the highest annual yield. Once you identify that institution, just read the number for their annual rate and then read the number for their total number of periods. Finally, we've got question number 6. It says the 2 annual rates that produced the lowest yields are blank and blank. So we're going to go over here once again to annual rate or annual yield. And we're going to find the 2 lowest yields. 2 lowest yields. Once you find the 2 lowest, you will go to the annual rate column and report the rates that go along with these lowest yields. So for example, let's say I had an imaginary bank called Natalie's Bank. My annual rate was 2.1% and my annual yield was 1.0%. Okay, so I would say, okay, well, Natalie has the lowest annual yield, so the rate that I will report as my answer is 2.1%. Now, obviously, this doesn't actually count as anything. You'll need to do it using the information actually provided in the table. So again, your answers are going to be percentages, and they are going to come from the annual rate column. So this information, all you have to do to get answers is read the table. It's just a little tricky to make sure that you're actually reporting the data that they want. So read carefully, double check your answers, and don't get marked off. I know you guys can read a table with no problem. Let me know if you have any questions on Project 6A.